30% is not a failing grade as a parent. There's a piece of research out there that says that successfully navigating these interactions with our kiddos 30% of the time with that earned secure attachment is good enough to build a earned secure relationship with your children. Going back to the idea that we believe this lie that we have to be perfect, being able to read something like that and say, I don't have to be perfect is really freeing.
Well, hi, Will and Carrie Ann. I'm so excited to see you.
Hi, Meredith. We're so excited to be here.
Glad to be here.
Carrie Ann, your glasses make me want to go get glasses.
Well, thank you. I call them my smart glasses. They make me feel smarter when I put them on. So I enjoy that. There's an element that it makes it fun.
I say yes, let's speak that over ourselves. We are smarter today. We hope we are. No, they're really, really cute. Okay, so we like to start out with a little bit of a silly question. But it's actually not. It's very deep and important. And the question is tacos or hamburgers and why?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question.
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm actually going to jump into that one. Hamburgers.
Oh.
For sure.
Okay.
In fact, we were just talking about that because we live in Minnesota and it has been quite cold in Minnesota, but yesterday it was like beautiful. It was like 60 degrees and I almost had him stop on the way home to pick up a sleeve of hamburgers so we could cook them on the grill. And so I've just been craving that. I think that it is a very summery, like outdoor thing. And I just love, he cooks amazing hamburgers on our Blackstone in the backyard and they just are so, so good. So I would definitely say hamburgers.
That's the kind of compliment, Will, that says, so get on that, honey.
Yeah, right.
Get going.
I know what I'm doing tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Okay, Will, what's your answer?
I have to say tacos. I love myself a good taco because, goodness, I can have I've got a chicken ranch avocado taco that I like making at home that's really good. But you could also go with like beef taco and put some black beans on there. Like, there's so many options. It's so good.
Okay, well, I just have one thing to say. If there's not tacos in heaven, I'm gonna have a problem. I feel like the feast or whatever, it needs to.
I think it's got to include people from every nations, right? Like we'll have all kinds of, we'll have Indian food, there'll be
That's
Thai
right.
food.
Oh my
great.
goodness, yes to that, 100%. Well, we could sit and talk about food for the next hour, which would not be a terrible thing to do. But also, we would love to hear more about you guys and your background, and we would love to hear about, the Connected Parenting Minute, or like what the podcast, the organization, like all the things, and, maybe a little bit about your family, any of that.
For sure.
You want to start, babe?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll give you a little background on our family to start out with. We have been married it'll come up 24 years. And we have 8 children, 6 biological and 2 we welcomed to our home through adoption. They came to live with us about 5 years ago, so right before COVID happened. When we first got engaged, we talked about walking into the foster care and adoption space, and we didn't really know what that looked like. I remember there was a little girl that when we were first married at our church that was in foster care, and we seriously had that conversation way back then. I think we'd been married less than a year. And at that time, I think we ended up deciding that we were going to maybe try for biological kids first. And we did. And then we had 6
biological children later.
Right. And it
turns out we can have kids.
We walked in to the adoption space a couple of times, dipped our toes in, but then ended up ultimately waiting until after our 6th was born. And through that, God taught us a lot about patience and parenting differently than we thought we would parent. And
wait, with your 6th one, or
well, actually with our 5th one.
Yes, before that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because we had 4 kids. Things were going pretty smoothly. We had 3 boys and a girl, and we were just like, okay, we got this. And we were kind of at that point where we had to decide, well, are we going to have any more kids? Are we going to be done? All those grown-up decisions that, you have to make at some point. And
I actually remember like I guess the six of us, so the four kids and the two of us walking into Target one time and being like, man, 4 kids is easy. We must be like the world's greatest parents, right? We should have another one, And that's the moment when God looks down at you and laughs, says, oh, honey, you just have no idea, do you?
I know, right?
Sounds like you need a lesson in humility.
And so our 5th child was born, and by goodness, he was definitely that lesson for us, and we learned so much through him. I call him one of God's greatest blessings to us, because he taught us how much we didn't know and how much we had to change as parents to meet him where he was at. And I feel like that really prepared us too for the world of foster care and adoption and understanding trauma. There were so many things we had to learn. And so that was a really good lesson. And then we thought, well, why not throw one more in the mix? Right. And so we got our baby girl, who she's now, 9? She just turned 9. Yeah. And so then we kind of, after she was born, we walked into the lane of actually international orphan hosting. And that was a fun adventure. There's just a lot of things we learned about all the stuff we didn't know about. And actually through that, we found a lot of resources on trauma, a lot of resources on parenting kids not born to us. And so that really started a whole lot of our journey in the trauma parenting world. And we did that for 2 summers. And then we opened our foster care license and had a couple.
That was a whole journey too, because our original intent, like our heart has always been with teenagers and sibling groups. The idea of a kid being 8, 10, 12, kind of depending on what the statistics say, but at that 8 or 10-year-old age in foster care, they're expected to age out. They're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to gear up and plan to move out on my own at 8. That's heartbreaking to me. And so for us, it was always look, there are kids that live in our county, likely a couple miles from our house, that are afraid they're never going to have a family. And so we're sign us up for those kids. I've got all the respect in the world for international adoption, and I have no problem with it, but that is just kind of where our hearts were at. And so we opened our foster care license, and we went through, it was a process. It was, shockingly, you hear people who have a hard time adopting for the foster care system because they have no kids. We were on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they're like, well, you have 6 kids. How could you possibly take care of more kiddos? And so we went through asking about over 150 kids that had TPRs, so a termination of parental rights, where they could not return to their biological family. And we're like, well, would these kids be a good fit for us? And got turned down every single time until, a friend of a friend had an emergency placement. Hey, could you take these kids for a weekend? And anybody in the foster care space knows how that story ends. But you get can they just stay with you guys for the weekend because they can't stay where they're at right now? Is a couple of years later, we finalized with them, and they've been in our home for 5 years now.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so at what point did the organization come into the mix here? And tell us some about that.
Yeah, so that started, I'm trying to think, we had so you know Ryan and Kayla North.
Yeah.
And so when
They've been here on our podcast too.
That's great.
Yeah.
And we got connected with them when we started the international orphan hosting, because we kind of dipped our toes in the water of connected parenting through our, like we said, through our 5th biological child. He's had some challenges and has forced us to grow. And then when we went into international orphan hosting, we're like, okay, these kids have, quote, real trauma. And so we need to really be ready. And so we went through every episode of the Empowered Parent podcast, and, started reading all the books and getting connected with people and all that. And then through that process, I don't remember the specific year, but one year, it was probably 2021, actually, now that I think about it, when they were doing the Tapestry Conference virtually, Ryan invited me to be on a dad's panel, for other adoptive dads to talk about trauma and our experiences, all that. And they had asked a question on the stage and kind of gone around and everybody got a chance to answer except I did because we ran out of time. And I was just like, like I really had something to say there. I really wanted to share my thoughts on that because I thought it would have added something. And so I went on Instagram and I recorded a 1-minute reel. I said, so this, just here's the question. And I, gave my thoughts on it and posted it. And like, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 views within a day.
Oh,
it was like,
cool.
Wow, that was something. And so, we kept doing that for, I don't know, a year or so. And at that point, there's thousands and thousands of views of these kind of 1-minute, like, how do you do connected parenting, kind of like simplify it down and all that. And from there we launched a podcast and now we've started speaking at conferences. We did 4 conferences last year and excited to keep going and see where that leads.
That's so cool. I've never heard that story. And it's kind of like, did you know previous to all of that like, gosh, I would love to like invest in the community. I would love to, come alongside families. Did you have that in the back of your mind or like which came first, chicken or egg?
Boy, that's a good question.
Well, it's interesting because, he started doing these Instagram reels and they were getting a lot of traction. And one thing I've always struggled with is I've always been very animated, like even growing up as a kid. And I've learned so much about myself, but I always kind of had this, like, I like to talk to people. I like to be up. And, I used to like to do drama and stuff like that. I'm like, I like to be on stage and I like to talk to people. And I always felt bad about that because I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to be like, it's all about me and all these, negative messages, right? So I always really wrestled with that. And it just started going, hey, maybe we could talk about this. Maybe there's a platform that, we could use to take the stuff that we've learned in different circumstances, and we have like a little credibility as far as the fact that we have children and we've dealt with a lot of things and we've invested a lot in trying to learn more about how to parent these children well. And we have a unique perspective. And if it weren't for the people that were brave enough to share their story, we wouldn't have learned as much as we did. So maybe we could turn around and do that for other people. And so we kind of started going, okay, maybe we should start speaking into that space because it has been so valuable for us. And I would love nothing more than other parents to go, wow, that was really helpful. Now they can change and impact their children and hopefully their children's children. I think way in the future here. And as much as we would like to be able to like take all the kids into our own home, I know I've been realizing I have limits. And I have, there's only so much I can do, even though I think I can do all the things. But this way we can hopefully impact more families and more children ultimately by just little bits and pieces at a time.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. And, so clearly your kids were a part of this journey and what we think we know before we're parents. And then what I heard you say was what I thought I knew when I had 4. And then what I thought I knew when I had 5 and now 6. And, and there's just, it's like this process that life/God takes us through where it's like, yeah, there's more to know, So how would you say that, looking back at who you were either before kids or before, number 5 or before adopted fosters, kids situations, before any of those, seeing yourself then and seeing yourself now, how would you say that your children have changed you?
Ooh, children are really kind of, to me, almost God's refining fire. Like they're the ones that force you to come to terms with, the best and worst parts of ourselves, right? Because our kiddos are unfortunately a lot of a reflection of who we are too. They're their own people, they have their own choices and all those things, but a lot of what they do and how they act is a reflection of how we raise them. And sometimes the things that annoy me the most about my kiddos' behaviors are things that I need to be working on inside of myself, And so I really think that parenting is the best kind of maturing and discipleship method that God really has, that if you can come into it humble and willing to pray and listen and really try to evaluate what you're doing and where your heart is at, that you can grow a lot through that.
I love the fact that for me personally, it's become this way of seeing the world. And I think that before kids, I used to feel like, well, I have to have all the answers. I have to have it all figured out. And I have to be able to give them the right advice and the right, wisdom and all these pieces. And so there was a tremendous pressure on myself to like get it right. And through having children and understanding how they work and how they make mistakes and how they grow, it's given me the grace to grow alongside with them. And I think that is one of God's really great blessings in the act of raising children. And even with the children not born to us, it's even shown me the amount that I need to grow in certain circumstances is so tremendous, but thankfully God gives it to me in little segments and not all at once, all the time. And I get to enjoy them as well. And that's one of the really fun parts about being a parent and being where I'm at and kind of getting rid of that pressure to be perfect in a lot of things. That's just to get it right every time. It's like, okay, let's have a redo on that. I need, you need the redo. I need the redo too. Mm-hmm. Let's work at it and get a little bit better. And through repetition, because one of the things we say is that you have to practice what you want to get good at. And so practicing these things over and over and over again really helps me to get better and hopefully helps them to get better. But sometimes it takes a while to see that progress. And so that's where I have to rely on God of being like, I know you're working on their hearts. I know you're working on their hearts. And I would love to see it someday. But if I don't, I'm just going to keep trusting that you're doing your work that I can't see. But I'd love it if you showed me one time.
Right. I love what you're saying here. And so who was it that told us, I have to get this right? I can't ask for help. Like, who does that? Like, where did we all get this message?
It's interesting. I was actually thinking about that. I think sometimes, like, when we grow up, we assume our parents have all the answers. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, that's, my parents could do, they had all the answers. And if there's something, wrong, normally I would internalize it. Well, I did the wrong thing. And it's not a fault of my parents. I think it's just the assumption that when you're trusting somebody else, that they have it taken care of, then you assume they know all the things. I remember the moment when I realized my parents don't know everything. What? It was like shocking to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a part of normal childhood development of just assuming that the people in charge actually know what's going on. And the shock that they're not, or that they don't, I try to tell my kids all the time, I'm not perfect. I do not have all the answers, and sometimes they believe me, other times they don't, but it is an interesting question. It's like, where does that come from?
Yeah. Is it society? Is it our parents? Maybe? Is it American culture? Because I just hear that. So I know you do too. You hear this so commonly from parents, from people in general, not just, folks that are parenting little people, younger people, but there's just some concept that says that we have to have it together. And I think what's so great about the message in your content is you don't have to have it together. None of us have it together, even if we thought we did at one point. And so how can we just, walk alongside each other? And I love what you said a second ago, having the grace to grow with them. And so, like, we know that God gives us grace and that God provides grace for us, but we also seek that grace from the people around us. And I think sometimes I'm seeking grace from my kids in a moment that they may not feel it or they may not have it to give. And so what do we do in moments when I know I'm doing it, like I need to take a minute, or I need to do, like you said, a redo. I need to think through something. I need to take a pause, or I need to apologize for something. And I'm seeking that grace from maybe my kids, but actually I need to like release them from the need to do that and just let them be kids. Have you experienced some of that in your parenting life?
I think, I mean, I feel like I do on a daily basis almost sometimes, because there's times where I know things are not going well on my part, and that maybe that's I didn't get enough sleep. I, let myself get sucked into social media and I'm not paying attention the way that I should be. And it is hard. I think the biggest part that I've learned for me is that sometimes there's days where I'm just like, this day is not going well. Like, I just want to get to the end of it and start again tomorrow. And sometimes I need to do that and just kind of make it through the day, like minimize, like sometimes I'll recognize like, I am grumpy today and who knows why that is, but I'm just going to minimize the collateral damage, so to speak, because as a parent, sometimes there's those days. And so I'll just be like, you know what, you guys have toaster waffles for dinner. We can I can just kind of keep my space as much as I need to. I mean, like, I love you. You guys, maybe you get a lot extra screen time, maybe something just to make it through the day, right? But I own those things too. And that's the biggest part. I mean, like, hey, I was feeling out of sorts yesterday, guys. I'm so sorry. Like, sometimes mom doesn't feel the best. It's not your responsibility. It's not your fault. But I just wanted to acknowledge that and tell you that I wasn't in my best. Will you please forgive me? Let's keep moving forward and continue building that connection. Because I find that if we sweep that under the rug, that it kind of builds a wall. Because I remember that as a kid, like sometimes things would go sideways with my parents. And the times that were most impactful for me is when my parent would come back and acknowledge that. And to me, that was so, I mean, it only happened a few times, but it was so impactful that I remember that because I was like, wow, my parent owned, what was going on. And it made me feel so seen and so valued. And so my philosophy is keep my list short, in the sense of if something goes on, I need to own it, even if it's really hard, because then it helps us start fresh.
Well, and what a gift to the kids too, to be able to see that model, the humility of I goofed up, the honesty that I don't have it all together today. Hopefully that can model for our kiddos that they don't need to be the magical perfect parent, that sometimes like we have that soundtrack, that belief that we were just talking about, that we have to have it all together, we have to have it all figured out. But if they see that modeled by us as parents, then hopefully that kind of fights that lie inside of them as they grow up and they become parents themselves.
Absolutely. And even in the moment, being a kid, that I don't have the expectation that they be perfect, and that, even if the world puts that out there, that's not the goal here. The goal is not perfection, right? Yeah. At the same time, sometimes kids that come out of difficult spaces, and this can be not only adoptive and foster, but if any of us even have, if we're parents, if we're an auntie, if we have any kids in our lives through any way, or a mentor, kids or teenagers, I think sometimes that come, for those kids and teenagers that come out of difficult spaces, we start to feel like we have to be perfect for them so that we don't, trigger them or activate them in a way, or we can prove to them that the world is not a bad place, or we can prove to them that adults can be trusted, or whatever. And so tell me, Will, what your experiences have been with something like that.
One of the most freeing things that we read early on in our, maybe not early on, but recently in our connected parenting kind of journey around trauma and stuff like that, is the idea that 30% is not a failing grade as a parent. There's a piece of research out there that says that successfully navigating these interactions with our kiddos 30% of the time with kind of that earned secure attachment is good enough to build a earned secure relationship with your children. And again, going back to the idea that we believe this lie that we have to be perfect, being able to read something like that and say, I don't have to be perfect is really freeing. Because once you have that, I feel like once you have that weight of shame or guilt or obligation lifted off your shoulders, it frees you to truly be the parent that, God has called you and created you to be. Like when you're not operating under that shame of, I screwed up again today, I can't believe I'm doing like that. That never leads you to a good place in parenting or in life in general, right?
Okay, so how has your growing up years impacted this? Was it like, when you think about who you were, not just who you were, but like how you made your way through, as a kid, as a sibling, perhaps as a student in your growing up years, how has that impacted who you are today?
So much. So for me, it's interesting because like I grew up in a religious family, and I grew up with only biological siblings, and so it's, I always believe that, serving those in need, and taking care of orphans and widows and all that stuff was all really important, but it wasn't something that my family always directly practiced, and so I can't think back of times when we necessarily interacted or things like that. But I do know that through growing up, and I mean, by the time I was out of high school, I knew I wanted to adopt someday, and so it's like somewhere in that process, hearing that over and over of how important it is, even if I wasn't walking through it, really kind of shaped that perspective. Because that was one of the things that I think you even mentioned earlier, Carrie Ann, is that even before we were engaged, like one of the conversations we had is that we both wanted to adopt someday. Like that was just always on our hearts. It was just always, that's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And so I know that my growing up kind of shaped that and kind of implanted that in my heart. There wasn't any one specific experience I can point to, but it was just kind of the culmination of my journey that kind of led me to that place.
Yeah. It's interesting because I grew up, I had 4 younger siblings. I was the oldest and the only girl. And the thing I specifically would say came out of my childhood is that my mom and dad actually chose to homeschool us, which was very countercultural in that time. And I just remember feeling very wanted. I don't know. I mean, like, everybody has a different experience in childhood growing up, but, I remember like our neighborhood kids the parents would talk about, well, they can't wait till they go to school. And, sometimes I say that too, like, oh, can't wait till you guys get a break. Cause that's our normal sometimes. But I just remember my mom always being like, I never want you guys to be gone. And just feeling so cared for. And I remember thinking, I want my children to feel like that one day, regardless of what school, choice we have and whatever. But that narrative that, my mom used to say, I would never trade you for all the money in the world. And it sounds like a silly thing because hopefully no parent would change their child for all the money in the world. But her verbally saying that just really struck a chord with me. And I'll tell my kids that there's no amount of money in the world that could exist that would want me to not be with you. And so I think that created a culture of how do I make my children feel seen? How do I make my children feel valued? And, the actual practice of that is taking an effort because every child is unique. And so, they're going to hear that in different ways. And so it's a lot of work on our part to figure out what makes this child tick, especially with 8 of them. But then 2 of actually putting that into practice because, if you're familiar with the love languages, there's different things that click with different people. And, the love languages that I feel, our children aren't going to feel the same way. And so I have to actually go out beyond myself to figure out how am I going to meet that child where they're at. And it doesn't have to be all the things all the time. But that's important to me, and it's important to us, I think, as marriage, be married and parenting our children. We want them to one day, when they do launch, that they know that they have a safe place here with us, that they know they can come to us with concerns because we listen to them, and that they feel valued. And, they're going to choose what they choose in life, and we're going to support them through that. But our hope is that we feel like a safe place to them.
Right. And I hear that, through your words, that both of you in your growing up years, you have much to glean, in a positive light. And if you're on planet Earth, then I'm sure that every childhood experience wasn't perfect, and so what can give hope to people is that, through whatever challenges as, adults, we can look back and, hopefully glean the positives away from that, learn from the hard things and glean from the positives. And so I love how you guys are doing that. So I know you guys, utilize a ton of different resources and books and people and podcasts. And, so when you think about the resources that have influenced you, like beyond like your personal relationships, like who would those be? Like if people are like, okay, my kids are facing some challenges, I'm facing some parenting challenges. So beyond what you guys offer, which we're going to have in the show notes for sure, like who has influenced you? What are some resources that you would recommend for parents?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we've talked already about Ryan and Kayla North's their Empowered Parent podcast, which has been great. TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention. Their stuff has been really foundational in helping us understand how our children work and how to meet their needs. I think a lot of it, the era that I grew up in is, very much of like children to just do what they're supposed to do. And, we've kind of shifted as a culture, I think, to take into consideration, well, children have feelings and there's other things going on. I'm trying to think of some of the other.
Well, specifically, if we want to have suggestions, there's the Connected Parent, I think is really good. That's with Lisa Qualls and with Karen Purvis. Because a lot of people have heard of the Connected Child, and it's a fantastic resource. But the Connected Parent, I think, is even more practical for parents to read. We've always loved kind of the brain science stuff that like Tina Payne Bryson and Dr. Dan Siegel put out. There's the Whole Brain Child, which is kind of like fundamental in understanding the brain science of parenting. Some of their follow-up books, I think, what was the Power of Being Seen is the one that came after that, I believe. That one kind of breaks it down into helping children feel seen, safe, secure, and stuff like that. And so to us, it's like just there's a lot of great books out there that really talk about that, about the brain science of why does this parenting style work better for kiddos, and how does it like kind of the mechanics of how it works in our brains to help us feel safe, but there's you've even been reading like kind of like just a personal development book that talks about the idea of feeling safe, even in just conversations, is fundamental for adult relationships too.
I geek out in brain science stuff. I'll be honest. I'm like, if I could, have a redo as far as like education goes, I would probably choose to go somewhere into neuroscience, because it's completely fascinating to me.
I totally agree. I want to hear where you're headed with this,
Yep.
but like when we can understand the biology of it, it takes some of the mystery out, and it helps us to see it as like, this is like something happening in your body. This isn't just like you're imagining it.
Right. It's a hard read, but The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog,
Yes.
was just so good. It was pretty deep, and like, I understand not everyone has the capacity to hear those hard stories, but to me it was so fascinating, the science and the way that it was being discovered and understood more deeply, and just how much it's changed in, the past 40 years, so to speak, even.
Well, so Boy Who's Raised His Dog is fantastic. If you want a lighter read, like a more of entry level, the What Happened to You.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
That
Absolutely.
Oprah and Bruce
Perry
wrote.
and Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm.
That's a fantastic overview. I think it's a great entry point into kind of the world of connected parenting and kind of understanding why this all works and how it impacts our brains.
Well, and, Will was alluding to, I've been recently reading a lot of books. I just finished 2, which is great because I've got like I'm hoping to read like 30 books this year. And I'm like, it's like, you're one behind. I'm like, shoot. But I just finished listening to reading Crucial Conversations, which is a really fascinating book in the aspect of having difficult conversations. And they really harp on the understanding how the conversation's going in sense of felt safety, essentially, and how when the brain gets into the fight, flight, or freeze, it's not going to hear those things. And so it's a good peer-to-peer, but it's also, I think, a really good adult to child conversation. It can be applied in that way, but I think overall that's going to be one of my highly recommended books. I also finished like The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Like it's a pretty popular book right now, and it was just interesting in my own like personal development. I think she has some more resources kind of in the aspect of parenting, and I have to dig into that a little bit. But the basic concept of you can't control anybody else. Sometimes you have to just let it go and be okay with that. And it was a fascinating read, and I think it kind of helped me in some aspects.
This is a great list. We're going to do our best, listeners. We're going to do our best to get these in the show notes. And because, we love to hear resources that work. And, so as we're kind of unfortunately reaching the end of our time here, just a couple of more things I wanted to discuss with you. But one is, what are just some really simple, basic things that we can do for families that are seeming to be perhaps in need? And that's a cautious moment there. You don't want to just come up to someone and say, well, I can see that you're in need. That might not go well.
That's actually a great point not to do that, because I'll tell you, there was a point when I think we were pretty newly married, and I think I was pregnant with our first. And I had this lovely friend who had the best of intentions, but every time I ran into them at church, they were like, boy, you look tired. And it was supposed to be like an empathetic, like, I see you and all this stuff. And finally I had to tell them, I'm like, please stop saying that because it makes me feel so bad. But yeah, there's an element of maybe keeping those observations to yourself.
Yeah. The question is coming out of like, this is like a really good friend of yours, or someone that, you feel really confident and comfortable. Maybe they've shared some of the challenges that they face in their families. What are some ways that really, really straightforward, easy ways that any of us can come alongside another?
I mean, to me, one of the things that can be really helpful is having somebody that's safe to really vent with. Because as parents, especially for parents that haven't adopted, there's a wall up there. Like, if I don't know you well enough to trust you with what I'm going to say, like, I'm not going to say it, because I will never throw my adopted kiddos under the bus or my biological kiddos under the bus with some of their behaviors and the things we're struggling with at home if I don't know that you're a safe place to say that to. And so having a handful of people that I can deeply trust and say, I've had a day, I'm not trying to fix this, I'm not trying to throw my kids under the bus, but I just need to let some of this out. Like, I've got a couple of people that I can talk to. Obviously, one of them is my wife. But if I need to call somebody else and just vent and unpack for a minute, that's hugely valuable for me personally.
Yeah, like another dude. I mean, that's legit. Yeah, absolutely. Carrie Ann, what do you think?
Yeah, I really think being a good observer is very helpful. Like, I know that I have a terrible memory, and so I will be honest, there's times where I keep notes on people. There's just a lot of things flying through my head, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, this person likes this. And sometimes, because, you can go up and say, well, what can I do for you? And someone comes up to me and asks me that, I'm like, well, I don't really need anything. Like, I might be having a difficult time, but I could not process what to tell you
it's
that
an
I need.
overwhelming question.
It is 100% is. And if somebody comes up and says, hey, I got you your favorite coffee, or hey, here's, I noticed you like this, here you go, or it just offers to do something, I am way more likely to say, wow, thank you, and just genuinely feel seen in that moment. And sometimes that is a total mood lifter for me.
Oh, absolutely. It could be your high of the day. Mm-hmm. It really can. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, and speaking of beautiful, I didn't plan that segue, but here we are. Where are you seeing beauty in this season? I'd love to know.
Ooh, beauty. I think it's kind of beautiful. Our kiddos are a little bit older. Like, our oldest is almost 22, and like we said, our baby is 9 now, which is crazy. But there's a depth of relationship developing between our kiddos that is kind of neat to see. Like last night, my 22-year-old was sitting down with our 17-year-old who's struggling in math. He's having a rough time, and he sat down with him for like 45 minutes and went through these ridiculous algebra problems and whatever. And at the end, they were both smiling, and our 17-year-old's like, I get it. Like he had this like surprised look on his face, like he couldn't believe he understood it and was able to get through it. But there's that, and then like our 16-year-old daughter, she has got just like the world's biggest heart for caring for people. Like, I don't know if you want to tell the story about the other night when she was talking about what she wants to do.
Oh, yeah. She comes into our room. I mean, and it was way past bedtime. She's like, oh, I saw your light was on. So, it's like 11:30 or midnight. And she goes, I just wanted to tell you, I think I know what I want to do with my life. And we're like, okay. And she's like, I want to help people like my sister. And because we have a daughter with special needs. And we're like, wow. Okay, that's amazing. Now go to bed, But it was just this
You'll need
moment.
sleep to do that.
I know, right? And but it was just so beautiful to see her noticing a need and going, I think I want to do that. And we'll follow up, and who knows where God will lead her. But just to see that in some of our kids, and then to see the kindness that exists between some of them at some points, because it doesn't always exist. But it's very sweet to see them developing relationships, and just to know that there's a little part of that. A big part of it exists because we said yes. That we said yes to the children that God wanted to place with us, and it's just it's a kind benefit that I think sometimes we need to reflect on more of seeing that beauty. So I think that's a great question, Meredith.
Well, beauty can be defined in a lot of different ways. And I love that, the source of some of our lives' greatest challenges are also the source of the beauty in our lives sometimes. And and maybe that takes time sometimes for us to see. At least it does for me. But,
oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my goodness, this has been wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here with us today. And yeah, we're going to have all of this information so that folks can take advantage. And man, I just can't wait till I see you guys in person at the next conference or whatever is coming up. But also, we got some snow today, so
Did you? That's beautiful.
Yes, we will until the end of May. So there's beauty outside in the snow as well. And
my southern friends don't believe us when we say that, but I agree.
Yeah, I get that. I'm from Texas, so yeah. There's beauty, but sometimes it's a struggle looking past the concrete. But yeah. Well, thanks again for being here, and to our listeners, we will see you on the trail.